Hello, Rimfire friends. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm in the shop today, and I want to talk about a subject a little bit controversial, maybe with the 455, 457 model of rifles. When CZ switched the platform from the 452 and Bruno's, of course, to the 455, they adopted a switch barrel platform, which involves the ability to change barrels and calibers, of course, with mag insert and the barrel of your choice. So as a result, the 455 and 457 have to have a firing pin that is able to accommodate the larger 17 HMR and 22 Magnum, 22 long rifle. So what that means is that the firing pin is not built for just the 22 long rifle. It is built for the larger case of the 17 HMR and 22 Magnum as well. And so as a result, the firing pin imprints farther off the rim into the thicker non-primer impregnated part on a 22 long rifle case. And so basically, what does that mean? Well, see if I can focus there. On a 22 long rifle, you have the firing pin that is basically designed to impact a much wider case. And so when you're using a 22 long rifle, barrel, whatever, the firing pin is hitting farther off on the case, which can do a few things. The thicker part of the rim has no priming compound, and the firing pin itself, the impact is partially wasted because it has to basically impact through the thicker portion of the brass for no reason. Now, I say no reason, but if you were going to switch calibers, that would be important to have a universal firing pin so you could switch. But if you're using your gun exclusively for 22 long rifle with no plans ever to switch, you're basically causing unnecessary harmonics by impacting on the part of the rim with no priming compound. Okay, so if you take, for example, some like European bench rest guns in 22 long rifle, match guns rather, the firing pin is generally impacting well inside the case rim exterior where the priming compound is. And so you're not wasting any impact on the part of the brass case that has no compound. So why is that important? Well, the reason it's important is if your firing pin hits with quite a bit of force, you generate a harmonic resonance on the case, which travels down the barrel before the actual impact explosion or detonation of the powder. So that can affect accuracy. It also, when you're impacting the thicker part of the case, your firing pin impact is wasted because it's hitting part of the rim that's thicker and harder, and so less force is going into the actual area where the priming compound is. And so one of the things that you can realize from what we're talking about today, reprofiling your striker, which is basically removing the impact on the edge of the rim and only allowing it to strike inside the rim where the compound itself is. So how do you do that? Well, on a CZ, you can see the firing pin here. And so you can see at the top here, there's kind of like a cutout, a slight radius in the actual bolt head itself, just at the 12 o'clock position of the firing pin. And that's to allow for the larger diameter, 17 HMR case. And so what you'd basically do is you would remove a little bit of material where it would be important to have on a larger case, 1722 Magnum, and reprofile it just for 22 long rifle. And that way the firing pin impact itself is not as long, for example, but it's impacting more in the area of a 22 long rifle instead of on the edge of the rim, and in my case, air. Meaning it's impacting, if I can focus there, it's impacting in an area where there's nothing. And so when you reprofile it to be farther in, you get a much more significant impact strike. And for example, if you were to do this test, and I've done this on every single 455 and 457 I've owned, the ones that are exclusively for 22, of course. What you basically do is when you're testing this, you are, for example, pulling some live rounds and testing the impact on just the primer compound alone with no powder or bullet in, of course. And you can actually hear the detonation of just the primer alone increase as you gradually move the edge of this firing pin off the rim. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, wait a minute, and you've ran and you've grabbed your case from your Savage or whatever, and you're like, well, my firing pin isn't designed for switch barrel on my 22 Savage, and it's outside the edge of the rim. Sure, not uncommon whatsoever, because the manufacturer of these mass-produced firearms never really intended for what I'm trying to do with them or what some people are trying to do with them. So for the average rifle, it doesn't make a difference. You'll find on some well-made target rifles of different manufacturers, countries of manufacturing different vintages, that the firing pin impact is well inside. And there's lots of information documented on this sort of thing and books written and that sort of thing. But on the CZ 455 and the 457, it's particularly important because of the switch barrel system. Now, I've done it on other rifles too, but these two rifles are one of the few that are out there that have this problem. Seiko has one, of course, too. So what will modifying this striker do? Well, it can do things like improve ignition, which will improve consistency of your ammo. It can do stuff like eliminate or reduce flyers. It can do nothing at all. In my experience, what it actually impacts the most is flyers. And I've noticed it more on inexpensive ammo, as you guys know, that I shoot the most of. So for me, it's the ability to reduce flyers in inexpensive practice ammo. I haven't noticed the biggest increase from match ammunition, but that's most likely because the flyers are reduced because the ammunition is match. So is this an attempt or an experiment to turn CCI standard velocity into ELI match? No, not in the slightest. The main reason is this rifle will never shoot 17 HMR or 22 Magnum. Therefore, this firing pin that's designed to accommodate those other two cartridges is completely pointless in my rifle. And that little bit of accuracy that I can bring back to the 22 long rifle side is what is interesting to me. And like I've said before, I've never not done this on my rifles, and I do it the same reason I glue in my barrels, because I notice a difference. So I'll leave that up to you guys to experiment. It's a very simple process, and I'm going to pause this one here. I'll get this bolt apart and I'll show you what's involved. Alright, so I've got the bolt apart here, typical CZ 455 bolt disassembly, and this is the firing pin, which for you 457 guys probably looks nothing like you're used to. This is the old school Bruno 455, 452 style firing pin. One of the reasons the 457 is so rad is the firing pin is much slighter, and so your lock time is much faster. This is a very heavy unit, and so that'll affect the speed of the impact. I think that's one of the reasons that CZ went to that new design. Was one of the reasons was increased lock time. But anyway, you'll see here you have this chisel point on this firing pin, and so the firing pin basically rides like this in the bolt, and it impacts like that. And so our goal, or my goal, is this little tip here, didn't frame there, sorry, that little tip at the end, we're going to be slightly scalloping that to reduce the impact on the rim, to push it farther inside the case. Or so when the firing pin impacts, it only impacts inside the portion of the rim that does not have any priming compound. So it's pretty straightforward to do it. There's lots of ways to do this sort of thing. I would say if you've never done this before, probably with the edge of a very fine file, diamond or otherwise, or some people can do it on a stone. I've done it on Dremels. Once you've done a few, you get pretty brave. And probably I would say the best way to approach this if you've never done it before is rather than put it in a vise and take a side profile out here, I would start from this way, which is the top of the firing pin, because it's at the 12 o'clock position. is to take your file from this way. And it's going to take you, I don't know, maybe a dozen assemblies and disassemblies hitting on a rim before you get the ideal profile you're looking for. Less is more. So the way I always do it is I always kind of have an assortment of fired brass I take home every once in a while for my rain sessions and for experiments like this. And it's kind of important because you can kind of use them for this experiment to see your progress. So I'm going to pause this one here and I'll get going on this. Alright, so I thought I'd show you guys my progress of about 5 minutes with just a simple needle file is what I used, and I used a stone, just like a sharpening stone I keep in my shop. I'll show you what it looks like. I would classify this as fine or extra fine. It's kind of the one that lives in my shop and for such purposes like this, and that was mainly just to smooth the file cuts a little bit. So I'll show you what it looks like in a second outside of the bolt, but basically this is the profile that I've created. Let me get my pointer here. And so you can see the bolt in its decocked position. You can see that the firing pin or striker head itself is well inside that cutout, whereas before it was right up against it, because quite a bit has been relieved, and I'll show you in a second, but I'll show you these guys first. So this one here was the original, and then I didn't do a progress one because there was no point with that, but you can see I've got a couple of different brands there. And so like a CCI, one was a Blazer, one was a Standard Velocity, actually one was a Federal CCI rather. So a couple different brands all the way down to an Ely. And you can see, I'm trying to get the light correct there for you. You can see the difference in the striker impacts, I hope. And I'll post up a pic that you guys will get a better sense. But you can see that it's way inside the rim and exactly where it should be. And it's hard to show it on camera, but if you get the light just right, it's substantially deeper than the other one because there's no wasted energy on the rim where there's no priming compound. And so like when I did these were all alive. I pulled the rounds on, like I said, to test the sound, and the sound is substantial. It's almost like a CB short or a cap gun. The primer compound is so loud compared to before. So it's super simple to do, not complicated at all, and I'll just show you quickly, if I don't fumble it too badly, what it looks like outside the bolt itself, so you guys can kind of see what you're up against. So here's my firing pin, and again I'll post up a picture. I don't know if you're going to be able to see too well there, but quite a bit at the back at this portion here has been removed. And so you're ending up, I would say, with half of your original profile. And that's how much, because the 17 HMR 22 Magnum is quite large. And then when you compare it in the end, that's the impact. It's substantial. Like when I see it, it reminds me of a European match 22 long rifle. That's very similar to what they look like. And like when you get it in the right light here, it is so much deeper than the original. And so that's where the difference lies with this sort of thing. Your impact is much, much harder because it's not going through the wasted material on the rim. So anyway, that was just my quick kind of thing that I do on all my CZ rim fires, and the same principle, like I said, applies to the 457 if you're not going to shoot 17 or or 22 Magnum because the case difference is substantial. It's also quite a bit thicker due to the pressures, of course. So anyway, if you're shooting a dedicated dedicated 22 long rifle like I am, it's a worthwhile mod. So I'm going to leave this one here. Any questions or comments, leave them below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But otherwise, thanks a lot as always for watching.